Sure appreciate everyone being so prompt. This is meeting number 6 of the Licensing and Occupation Committee. We do have a quorum. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Adams, Senator Douglas, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Higdon, Senator Howe, Senator Mays Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Senator Nemus,
Present.
Senator Thayer, Senator Thomas, Chairman Schickel.
Thank you. Do any members have introductions? Let the record reflect we do have a quorum to do business. I have a special friend, Dr. Don Schweiker, is in the audience. Don, thank you for being here. He's an advisor to me on medical issues and been a long-time friend. It's always good to see him at the Capitol representing the Kentucky Medical Association. We are going to get right to our agenda, but before I do that, I want to report a bit of good news. As Chairman Cook said, the staff has just done a great job, this committee, and boy, just working, and we sure appreciate it, making us look good, always with a smile on their face. And as you know, the head of the staff, Bryce Amberger's son, has cancer and has been in Children's Hospital, underwent a transplant for the cancer, and I just was told this morning that's been successful. I know he's been in our thoughts and prayers along with Bryce. Bryce is here working today. He's just in the office because he didn't want to get infected, but Bryce is here today, so we're very thankful for that, and I just wanted to let the members know that Bryce and Luke are doing good, doing better. First thing and only thing on the agenda is House Bill 551, an act relating to wagering and making an appropriations. Therefore, sponsor Michael Meredith, who is no stranger to this committee. Chairman Michael Meredith, have a seat. And, of course, Chairman of the L&O Committee, Matt Cook. Also, I think what we'll do, let's shoot for about 10 minutes for you guys and see how that works, and then 10 minutes for the other side, and then we'll go from there. Introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Michael Meredith, State Representative for Kentucky's 19th House District.
Good morning. Thanks, committee, for hearing us this morning. I'm Representative Matt Cook, representing the 72nd District.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the discussion that we're going to have today is not a new discussion here in Kentucky or across the nation. The PASPA Act of 1992 was overturned in May of 2018 by the United States Supreme Court. And what that Supreme Court action did was it opened the door for states to create legal, regulated marketplaces for sports wagering. Prior to that, only the state of Nevada and a few grandfathered states that had already been in the program before PASPA was passed were the only places where you could legally wager on sports. In February 2022, there was a poll done across Kentucky, and that poll said that 65% of people support passing a sports wagering law in Kentucky. And once you tell folks that the money goes to the pension system, that support level rose from 65% to 74%. Let me be really, really clear, though. This is about regulating and making legal a marketplace that already exists. If you look, the American Gaming Association estimates that there's a little over $1 billion wagered each and every year in the illegal and unregulated marketplaces in Kentucky, just inside our borders. And when I say illegal and unregulated, I'm talking about two different sources. Those sources are the offshore accounts that many of you have heard of before, where you can place a wager with an offshore company, and about 80% of the people that take part in that wagering believe that they're wagering legally because they can access that from their phone, from the internet, from their home computer, but they're not. The other form that I'm talking about is the local bookie. And there have been several of those across the state through the years who have operated, but about $1 billion in that space. The other thing that I want to bring to everybody's attention is that 6 of the 7 states that border Kentucky already have a legal program of sports wagering. And if you look at the geography of our state, 46 counties in Kentucky border one of the states that already have the legal program, meaning that citizens in those 46 counties only have to cross a county line, which is a state border, or cross a river, and they can legally bet in the other jurisdictions that are already legal. For the last NFL season, the GeoComply websites provided, or GeoComply system provided us with data showing that over 5 million checks were performed in Kentucky on 181,000 unique accounts that already exist and are registered with legal jurisdictions that border us. In Ohio, in the month of January, there was $1 billion bet in their sports wagering program during the first month. And over 1 million checks were done on Kentucky accounts registered in Ohio during that 1 month period, tied back to 58,000 unique accounts. There was a study done in 2020 by Commonwealth Economics, and I have backed out the numbers that were related to the previous bill on this that had online poker and daily fantasy in it as well, because this bill only focuses on sports wagering. That study estimated that approximately $2.3 to $2.4 billion would annually be bet in a Kentucky sports wagering program, and that would bring in about $22.3 million annually in tax revenue for the state. Again, I bring that number up from that study because I think it's important that we know that there's over $1 billion bet illegally right now. And we know there's a significant amount of the marketplace that is just going across the state line, across the river to place their wagers as well. We don't have a dollar amount on that, but it's pretty significant. So now onto the bill that you have before you today. What it does is it creates a regulated marketplace for sports wagering that takes this activity out of the darkness, out of the shadows, and into the light in a regulated format. It establishes a sports wagering fund that pays for the regulation of the industry, and it sends 2.5% of the total tax revenue raised from it to a problem gaming fund that is established to help with problem gaming issues. It sends the balance of the money after those two parts are paid to Kentucky's permanent pension fund. It makes the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission the exclusive regulator and has exclusive jurisdiction over sports wagering and licensing. The 9 tracks in Kentucky, the 9 horse racing tracks in Kentucky, have the opportunity to be licensed for an upfront initial fee of $500,000 and a $50,000 annual renewal fee. As far as broadening that beyond just the tracks, though, we do allow each track to contract with up to 3 service providers that would provide either on-site wagering technology or technology for mobile and internet applications that can contract with those tracks. To be licensed to be a service provider, you'd pay a $50,000 initial fee and a $10,000 annual renewal fee. The Racing Commission must establish a system within 6 months of the effective date of this act. And the Racing Commission also is able to license the actual occupations that work inside the sports books and that work for the service provider companies. As far as the tax goes, we tax the adjusted gross revenue from this industry. And adjusted gross revenue is figured on wagers placed, less winnings paid out, less a small excise tax that the federal government charges sports wagering companies. And then you would pay a 9.75% rate on any wagers that are made in person at one of the licensed facilities on that AGR, and 14.25% on wagers that are made on a mobile device or on the internet. The bill does prohibit tampering with the outcome of a sporting event and creates a new Class C felony related to that. It also prohibits employees of tracks or service providers from betting with the company that they work for, and that's handled in the occupational licensing. It would also prohibit sport event participants from wagering on events that they participate in and creates a Class A misdemeanor for that. The LRC fiscal note that came back just the other day on the proposal says that at full implementation, we should bring in about $22.9 million annually to the state in taxes and license fees. And again, that would go to the 3 sources that I mentioned earlier: the regulation of the industry through the Racing Commission in the Sports Wagering Administration Fund, 2.5% to problem gaming, and the rest to the Kentucky Permanent Pension Fund. There were numerous technical corrections made throughout the process on this bill, and we've met with many, many different parties to discuss it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have at this point.
Thank you. Chairman, did you have testimony?
Well, I'll just say something briefly here.
Go ahead,
Chairman
go ahead, and
Schickel.
then we'll take questions.
I'll go
Yeah.
a little bit more detail than I did yesterday with the ditto, but Chairman Meredith needs no help on this. He's worked tirelessly on this, and I'm just here in a role of support to help him see this across the finish line. Just some highlights: online poker's been taken out. They've added 2.5% from problem gaming, which I think is important to all of us. And they've taken off the 12-month in-person sign-up, and we're talking $23 million in tax revenue for something that our constituents all want. So I'm very much in support of this, and thank you all for hearing it.
Thank you, and thank you for staying well within the time limit. We do have several questions, and I think we'll go ahead and take questions from you all and see where this goes. The first one is from Senator McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guys, thanks for the bill today. And as Chairman Meredith, thanks for talking me through some things this morning. Kentucky has some interesting logistics related to who can administer this versus other states like Ohio. And I had joked at the beginning of session when I wore my Cincinnati Reds tie-in that maybe I go place a bet on the Reds to win the World Series down at Great American Ballpark and then come in with my slip. That being said, help walk me through this, please. So these are administered through the tracks. They kind of get a master license, and then there's sub-grantee licenses, and the terms are more artful in here as they always are. But the sub-grantee license, so like to DraftKings or something like that, that also gets paid through the Horse Racing Commission, correct? Not to the track.
They would be licensed by the Racing Commission, correct?
So how does the track as the intermediary, do they derive a source of revenue separate and distinct from that? And how's that defined? Or is it not? Is it just kind of up for negotiation?
It would be all part of the contract between the service providers and the tracks. Because each track can contract with up to 3 of those service providers, like a FanDuel or DraftKings.
So let me ask you this. If you are FanDuel, once you contract with any one of the 9 tracks, are you then authorized statewide at that point?
You'd be authorized to have the mobile application.
That's what I meant, the mobile app, yes.
The mobile application, yes, you'd be able to operate anywhere on that mobile app if somebody uses your app through that company.
So you're not...
But nothing in the bill prohibits those companies from contracting with multiple tracks, frankly, unless it's contractual with the tracks that they set up their contracts with.
But there's nothing in here that necessarily establishes, for the mobile app, I'm not talking about the mobile app. And Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the back and forth.
Well, your
If I may.
apologies accepted, but please go through the chair.
Yeah, absolutely. One more then, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed.
So if I've got a mobile app, there's nothing in here that creates a kind of a geofence situation that sets up territories where, like, you know, when I'm on, if FanDuel goes through Churchill Downs, when I'm in Turfway's territory, I can't use it in Northern Kentucky.
No, it's geofence to the state borders, but not geofence to any territory of the individual tracks.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got just a couple of questions. One, following up on what Senator McDaniel was talking about. Since we're talking a lot about the online space here, why do we need a bricks and mortar? Is this just so we can be able to regulate this appropriately, that we have to have some sort of brick and mortar attachment?
I don't think we have to have a brick and mortar, frankly, Senator. However, we do put a brick and mortar opportunity in there. I think folks think that it could be a good thing, drive people to those facilities. And some folks don't want to bet from their phone. They want to bet in person. They want to use cash. They want to be at a location where they can watch the games and bet while they're watching. It's just consumer behavior. If you look at the study that Commonwealth Economics did a couple of years ago, they estimate that about 80% of the activity will take place on the mobile app, and about 20% will take place in the actual brick and mortar space.
May I have one more, Mr. Chairman?
You may proceed.
I first learned of this by accident, how this all worked by accident a number of years ago. Callaway County sits on the Tennessee line. I had to go to court on a Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock for a hearing, which is just the worst time. And as I was coming back about 4:30, I came by a gas station right before I got to the line and saw 3 or 4 of my grown friends leaning up against the edge of their cars, playing on their phones, which kind of got my attention. So I wheeled around and asked them what they were doing, and that's where I learned about geofencing. So in that situation, your earlier testimony talked about being able to tie this directly to sports gaming and not other issues. So the technology's there that on these sites, if they've got sports betting or online poker or anything like this, they can filter out parts of this, because I don't understand how any of this works. I just have to have a yes or no answer. But they can filter out some betting platforms without filtering out all. Is that correct?
That would be correct. The geo compliance software that they use is very, very sophisticated. It's not perfect, but it's very sophisticated. As you said, I've got the same situation, Senator. I have friends that on Friday afternoons run across the state line in Tennessee. It's a 30-minute drive from where we live. They place a wager. They come home after work. There's also, and I had someone tell me just a week or so ago that they know a parking lot on River Road in Louisville where you can go and bounce off an Indiana cell phone tower and you can place the wager without crossing the river, without actually paying that toll that you'd have to pay to go take part in it over in Indiana. So it's not perfect, but it's really, really strong in the sense of the compliance that they put into these programs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We do not show anyone else with any questions. That means you've done an excellent job of explaining yourselves. Thank you, gentlemen. And now I will ask the folks that have a bunch of people signed up, but I always like to work together in this committee. So everybody that doesn't like this bill, why don't you come forward? We'll see how many we got. Welcome, gentlemen. I know most of you. It's good to see you here before our committee. Let's try, I know with 4 of you this might be a bit of a challenge, but I know you can do it. Let's shoot for 10 minutes, and I will introduce yourselves for the record and proceed with your testimony.
David Walls, Executive Director of the Family Foundation.
Todd Gray, Executive Director for Kentucky Baptist Convention.
Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center.
Gene Cole, Executive Director, Kentucky League on Alcohol, Gambling Problems, and Substance Use Disorders.
I'll go ahead and start. Good morning, Chairman Schickel and committee. Again, David Walls with the Family Foundation. Good to be with you all this morning and appreciate the opportunity to express our concerns about House Bill 551. The Family Foundation's opposition to the expansion of predatory gambling is well known to this committee, but with the issue of this magnitude, appreciate the opportunity again to lay out our concerns. Predatory gambling, especially in the expansive form that's being considered in House Bill 551, is not a victimless form of entertainment or competition. It is a form of financial fraud that sees the government partner with gambling interests to the harm of its own citizens. Government-promoted gambling, including commercialized sports wagering, will only further harm Kentuckians while bringing destructive cost to our families, communities across the Commonwealth. More broken families, increased addictions and divorce, and other social costs. And unfortunately, these social costs are only amplified when we're talking about online sports and video game betting being made on already highly addictive cell phones. Online sports betting puts casinos in the pockets of millions and has already led some states to report a tripling of gambling addiction problems. And make no mistake, despite any attempts to protect children from this highly addictive form of gambling, commercialized sports betting harms children and radically changes the way that children view sports. The high frequency of deceptive ads by gambling operators serves to normalize gambling for kids, leading kids to believe that gambling is central to playing and watching sports. Children will gain access to sports gambling apps on their phone when sports betting is legal. And the younger a child starts gambling, the more likely they will become a habitual and problem gambler. I would urge this committee and all the members of this honorable body to consider for a moment, is the expansion of predatory gambling really good policy in a time when addictions of all kinds are on the rise? Is the expansion of predatory gambling good policy in a time of continued high inflation, high gas prices, and other costs that are making family budgets tighter than ever? If a multi-million-dollar fund and new government program for problem gambling is needed to attempt to undo just some of the harms of this bill, wouldn't Kentuckians be better off without it? And finally, after just voting to ban gray machines because of very legitimate concerns about every gas station in this Commonwealth being turned into a mini casino, I certainly hope this honorable body will not vote to turn around and turn every iPhone in Kentucky into a digital casino that kids will have access to. One of the main purposes of government is to seek the welfare of its citizens, not to exploit the vulnerable. Government-sponsored expansion of gambling, by its nature, is bad government and bad policy. I would urge you and your fellow members to oppose this expansion
Thank
of
you.
predatory gambling. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I would tell the other, remember with your colleagues that those of you who are going first, you kind of have an advantage, but kind of be respectful of the person that's going after you. Introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Todd Gray, Executive Director for Kentucky Baptist Convention. I appreciate being able to speak to you all. I represent nearly 2,400 Kentucky Baptist churches from Fulton to Florence, from Paducah to Pikeville, and every spot and community in between, many of those in Louisville, places where you all live. Those churches are filled with men and women who work hard, pay taxes, educate their children. They are servants to their neighbors. They're the ones that show up when disaster strikes across our state or anywhere else. They're the ones that are at the funeral homes with casseroles and kindness and compassion for their neighbors. And they've gone on record year after year opposing all forms of expanded gambling in Kentucky. They're not against it because they want to keep folks from having fun or having what is sold to us as innocent and harmless entertainment. They're opposed it because they see the dangers. They recognize that expanded gambling preys on poor people. It's often the poorest people of our communities who are most vulnerable to the slick advertisement and the promise that the DraftKings will put out, the dual fans will put out about get rich quick. They oppose it because they recognize that it's highly addictive. Some say it's as addictive as alcohol or drugs or smoking. They oppose it because it opposes a work ethic. These are folks who get up every day, go to work, and earn their money and pay their bills, and they understand the challenges of work, and they also understand the deceitfulness of a get-rich-quick scheme. They oppose it for these reasons. They oppose it because it creates losers. They also know it invites corruptions. I guess for me, one of the biggest things that comes to mind, my early experiences as a young pastor in a rural community in Kentucky. Got a phone call late one evening from a family in our church, a couple with two little boys, and went to the house. It was late at night, and they, husband and wife, at the kitchen table, and they were discussing what she had just discovered, that her husband had pawned almost everything they owned of value. He had spent his entire paycheck, had been doing this week after week after week. He even took out a loan against their home, the mobile home, the trailer that they lived in. And he did it because he had gotten addicted to a form of legalized gambling here in Kentucky. He ended up leaving the state and started a new family somewhere else in another state. She was left as a single mom to raise those two boys and do the best she could to pull her life back together. Those boys are now grown men. They're good boys. They may one day sit in the chairs that you're sitting in right now. Both of them are qualified to do it. And my guess is if they were ever in a place like you're in today, their mother would say, boys, you know from experience, this is not a good idea. This hurt our family, and we don't need to see more of it in Kentucky. There's a verse in the Bible, Proverbs 31, verse 9, that says, "Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead for the cause of the poor and needy." What's interesting about that verse is not just the clear directives for leaders to open up and to speak, to figure out what's right and wrong, and plead the cause of the most vulnerable. But what's most interesting is the context of that verse was given from a mother to her son. Her son was King Lemuel, and the mother was saying, "Son, here's your job as a leader. Your job is to open your mouth, judge righteously, figure out what's right and wrong, and plead the cause of the poor and needy." And I just urge you all, as the leaders that you are, I'm grateful for what you do. I respect your work. It's very difficult, but I just urge you to consider the implications of your decisions.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Richard Nelson, Executive Director.
Turn your mic on, sir, and introduce yourself again. Thank you.
Is that better? Thank
That's
you.
good, loud and clear.
Again, Richard Nelson with the Commonwealth Policy Center. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will try not to be redundant. There's 3 reasons why Commonwealth Policy Center is opposed to House Bill 551. We believe that it has the strong potential to corrupt sports. We believe that it will likely accelerate addictive behavior. And we believe that it will normalize gambling to kids who are vulnerable to this on their digital devices. One thing that hasn't been talked about is the possible corruption of sports. We've seen corruption in professional sports. Major League Baseball in 1919, Chicago Black Sox, 8 players took bribes and conspired to throw the games. It almost devastated baseball. Because of that, every major baseball clubhouse has in a prominent place Rule 21D, which says players, umpires, or employees of a team or the league who bets on a game they're not involved in will be banned from Major League Baseball for a year. If they're involved in the game, the ban is for life. Cincinnati Reds' Pete Rose, one of the best players of the game, is still facing the consequences for betting on games. In college sports here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the men's basketball team forewent its 52-53 season because 3 of its star players were involved in point shaving. In 2008, NBA ref Tim Donaghy was caught in a gambling scandal betting on a game that he refereed in. Those are a few examples. Some major news outlets have brought to the attention the dangers of sports gambling. In The Atlantic in September of 2021, Will Leach said this in his article entitled, "Sports Gambling is a Disaster Waiting to Happen. Betting on Tom Brady's next completion may sound like harmless fun, but it's not. People will forgive a lot in sports, but they do have to believe that the results are legitimate. Without that, the games are meaningless, a sinister chaos." Sports Illustrated had an article in 2019 entitled 7 of the Most Infamous Match-Fixing Scandals That Shook World Football. And just in the FIFA World Cup last year, there were rumors that swirled of the game, of the match being fixed. One other point I'd like to make, and then I'll close.
Quickly, because there's another person up.
We believe that this will likely accelerate addictive behavior. To David Wall's point, in the past, you had to go to a certain venue to place a bet. You had to go to a casino or a horse track or somewhere else. But with the legalization and the creation of a framework of sports gambling, you will have the possibility of having a casino in your pocket. Digital devices are already very addictive to children and to other people as well. And for these reasons, Commonwealth Policy Center is opposed to House Bill 551.
Thank you for your testimony. We are over time, but I'm going to go ahead and give you some leeway, sir, because I know you have something important to say, and then I'll have to compensate with the other side. Go ahead.
It'll be quick. Gene Cole with the Kentucky League on Alcohol, Gambling Problems, and Substance Use Disorders. Ditto to everything that they've said. And one thing, over in England, I know it's not U.S., but over in England, they have statistics of over 400 suicides committed because of gambling debts. That's just a little over one person a day killing themselves because they're so deep in debt they don't know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you all for your testimony. Any questions from the senators on the committee?
Motion on the bill.
We have a motion on the bill. Is there a second? Let the record reflect, we had a motion on the bill by Senator Thayer, seconded by Senator Nemes. Any questions of this panel? Gentlemen, in the interest of fairness, do you wish to come back up for equal time, or I don't really think it's necessary, but we can just go ahead and vote.
Don't want equal time, Mr. Chairman, but if I could just have just a moment to share
That
just a
would be
couple of
fine.
facts.
That would be fine. And senators, think of if you have any questions for other folks while he's doing that.
The main issue that I just want to bring out was if you look at the demographics of the sports bettor across the nation, and there have been a lot of surveys done on this, one of the things that was brought up was about this discouraging people from working or discouraging people from thrift and that kind of behavior, encouraging people to not work or things of that nature. The average age of the sports bettor is about 39 years of age. 68% of sports bettors have a college education. 69% of sports bettors make over $40,000 a year, and 62% of them are full-time employed, with the other larger parts being folks who are retired and those who are part-time employed. So I think that is some interesting data on who the sports bettors are in the marketplace today. And I would just further go as to say, I don't stand here to debate anyone's morals or their religious convictions. And I've said that over and over again about this bill. But again, we know this is happening in the marketplace already, either illegally or just outside the boundaries of our Commonwealth. And so I think it's smart that we regulate this as a state and provide a structure where folks know what is happening in the marketplace and know it's safe under the purview of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission,
Thank you.
who has a proven record of policing wagering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions? We have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion, excuse me, further discussion or questions? Further discussion or questions? Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Adams, Senator Douglas,
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Vote and explain.
Mr. Chairman, this is a tough one for me, and I'm going to vote aye, and I'll tell you why. I'm not into gambling, and many of my constituents aren't either. But, you know, I really represent District 22, but I also represent the Commonwealth. And because of this, I felt that letting it out of committee and allowing it to have more discussion would be a good thing for us here in the Commonwealth. I do realize the seriousness of the issues. I do realize the need to get a handle on some of the regulations. But should this go to the Senate floor, I likely will be looking at some other issues surrounding this whole area here. But I do think the allowing a greater discussion is a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Harper Angel,
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Vote and explain.
I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this legislation. We've been leaving money on the table for far too long, and I really, really hope that we cross the finish line with this legislation. Thank you.
Senator Higdon, Senator Howell, Senator Mays Bledsoe,
May I explain my vote?
Vote and explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll vote aye, and I'll say I too am not a sports bettor. I don't like it in particular. I don't bet on probably anything outside the $2 races at Keeneland. So this for me is not something I necessarily like. However, and I also don't think doing something to make money is good public policy. So I'm not a fan of it just to say we're going to raise some revenue, it's going to pay down some pension, good things. That's not justification for me to say yes. From a public policy, it's a dangerous precedent, I think, an argument. That being said, from just the research on a practical level, 40% of our state already is doing this and has access to it. 60% don't. So for me, it's a practical issue of allowing that other 60% to have the same access and have regulation on it. I too am hesitant, but I think for the sake of the conversation moving forward, it's important to have that on the Senate. So I'm a yes. Thank you.
Senator McDaniel,
Cast my vote and explain, sir.
Vote and explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to cast an aye vote today. I want to thank the pastors who came to the room today. You raised good and legitimate concerns that need to be taken into public policy, and I do appreciate your time and testimony today. I think that a couple of things of note that probably need to continue to be addressed. The first is not necessarily in this legislation, but how does the marketing from the service providers online occur? As a parent who has 6 kids in various states of permissions on electronic devices, particularly some of whom are required for schoolwork to access apps, I have seen things pop up that should not be there. I would hope that the industry will behave responsibly in that regard towards minors, and certainly think that a look at that in the future is definitely worth it. I do maintain concern about the brick and mortar location being restricted to a single provider. I know the chairman said that it wasn't as big of a concern as the online things. I think that he provided an excellent explanation of the level of competition that still exists there, and I will cast an aye vote.
Senator Nemus,
Aye.
Senator Thayer,
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Vote and explain.
I vote aye. 6 of our 7 surrounding states are already actively engaged in sports betting, including Tennessee, which by all accounts is a more conservative state than Kentucky, and they brought in $68 million for its general fund last year alone. You can stand in Covington, Kentucky, and look across the Ohio River and see a brick and mortar sports book location. The public wants this. We can't stop people from doing things that are bad for them. There are a lot of behaviors out there that done in excess are bad for people. But my constituents want this. The people of Kentucky want this. It's time that we give them the choice for free will, God-given free will to engage in legal sports betting. I vote aye.
Senator Thomas,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to explain my aye vote, please.
Vote and explain.
Thank you. I really think Senator Harper Angel and Senator Mays Bledsoe said it best. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. I mean, this has been going on for years. And I have to tell you, not just my constituents in Fayette County, but across the state, come up to me all the time and say, why don't we allow gaming here in this state? You know, they travel to Indiana, they travel to Ohio, they travel to West Virginia, and we're losing millions of dollars every year that could go to many good causes, like the pension system, because we're doing a good job of honoring our obligations to make the pension system fully funded. And I do have to say this, okay? And I said this yesterday. You know, I'm a Christian man. I go to church all the time, and I know a lot of good and moral people, and they drink, and they place a bet, and I think that's just fine. And they're very moral, and they're very religious. Finally, Mr. Chairman, give me one more minute.
Quickly, half a minute.
I'll accept that, Chairman Schickel. Okay. We're in day 2 of March Madness. How many people do you think here in Kentucky are going to place a bet on NCAA tournament? I would tell you they're going to be millions that are going to be finding a bet to place on the NCAA tournament. I think we just got to be realistic here. I think that's 30 seconds, Mr. Chair. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Chairman Schickel,
I vote no. There being 9 yeas, 1 nay, no passes, House Bill 551 is passed with favorable expression that same should pass. Congratulations to the bill sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, appreciate you all.
Is there anything else to come before the committee? Without objection, we stand adjourned.